The stars above Eridos blinked in a silent symphony, their light struggling to break through the thick clouds of dust and smoke as the Xyl'har fleet tore through the black void of space, entering the orbit of the unsuspecting planet. The Xyl'har were a race beyond ancient, with technology so advanced it bordered on the incomprehensible. Their ships, sleek, obsidian-colored dreadnoughts, hung like shadows over the world, their dark, gleaming surfaces absorbing every trace of light, making them appear as though they had materialized out of the very night itself. The first strike was swift and brutal, an unrelenting wave of destruction that descended upon Eridos without warning. Plasma bolts, laced with destructive antimatter, rained down upon the peaceful cities. The very sky seemed to scream as buildings crumbled like dust and firestorms erupted across the land. The Xyl'har made no attempt to engage in diplomacy or even demand surrender. To them, Eridos was nothing more than a conquest, a world to be raised and absorbed into their ever-growing empire. In the command center beneath the surface of Eridos's largest city, Kiera Valen stood frozen, watching the live feed of the attack. Her heart pounded in her chest, every breath thick with dread. She could hear the explosions through the intercom, feel the tremors beneath her boots as the ground shook under the relentless bombardment. Her fingers hovered over the holographic controls, her mind racing, but no strategy, no contingency plan, could have accounted for the overwhelming force they now faced. The Xyl'har warships moved with terrifying precision, their energy shields cutting through incoming fire with ease, their weapons returning with far greater devastation. The capital city of Taraz had already fallen, Kiera's hometown gone in an instant. She clenched her fists, the pain of loss, the weight of responsibility, driving her forward. But there was no time for mourning. She was the last line of defense. And if she failed, Eridos would fall without a trace. "We will make them regret this day," she whispered under her breath, her voice barely audible over the din of destruction above. The words were not a promise, they were a vow. Her people had never known defeat. They had fought to protect their civilization for centuries, and they would do so now. Kiera's mind flashed back to the days before the invasion, days when Eridos had been a thriving beacon of peace and knowledge in the Spiral Nebula, a planet, home to philosophers, scientists, and warriors. Eridos's people had not been a warlike race, but they were resilient. Every member of their society trained in the arts of defense, every city fortified against the dangers of space. They had never expected an empire like the Xyl'har to descend upon them, but they had prepared nonetheless. Her strategic mind raced through options. There was one last chance. An ancient weapon, buried deep beneath the surface of Eridos, a failsafe created long ago by the first leaders of their world. A weapon of unimaginable power. No one had ever dared to activate it, fearing the consequences. But now there was no other choice. It was either use the weapon or die. With a single thought, she gave the order. Activate Omega Protocol. Bring the core online. The command reverberated through the halls of the underground command center, relayed across secure channels to the last remaining pockets of resistance. Engineers scrambled to align the core's ancient power cells, the massive energy cannon that had been dormant for centuries, and send it into activation. Kiera watched the screen intently as the energy levels rose to dangerously high thresholds. The weapon's activation caused the entire facility to shudder with power, and she felt a cold, unyielding fear creep over her. She had no idea if the weapon would even function properly, but she couldn't afford failure. Not now. Outside, the Xyl'har fleet seemed to pause just for a moment before their forces regrouped. In the silence that followed, Kiera's hope flickered. Had the weapon worked? Had it struck their invaders? The answer came swiftly. A brilliant beam of pure energy burst forth from the planet's surface, its core temperature reaching millions of degrees, an explosion of radiant light. The beam surged through space with such intensity that the Xyl'har warships were thrown into disarray, their shields flickering as the energy began to destabilize their systems. The blast was felt across the system, sending ripples through space, and for the first time since the invasion began, the Xyl'har hesitated. Their fleet staggered. Kiera's heart beat faster. The power of the Omega weapon was beyond what anyone had anticipated. It was a weapon meant for entire fleets, a planet-destroying force that was built to eradicate even the mightiest enemies. She had unleashed the full fury of Eridos upon the invaders, and for a brief moment the Xyl'har fleet faltered. But as quickly as the moment came, it began to fade. The Xyl'har were adapting. The most advanced systems in the galaxy were now in play: repair drones, neural network recalibrations, energy shield adaptations. It was only a matter of time before they regained their momentum. Kiera's mind raced. They hadn't won. Not yet. The retreat she had hoped for was not out. Of fear, it was a tactical maneuver. The Xyl'har were regrouping, preparing to retaliate with even more deadly force, and then a transmission. The voice came through the command center's speakers, cold and unfeeling. Your world is nothing but an obstacle. A brief, fleeting moment in the course of history. We are the Xyl'har. You will be eradicated. The transmission ended with a brutal finality, leaving Kiera with the sickening realization that the Xyl'har were no longer merely invaders. They were a relentless force bent on erasing everything they deemed unworthy. And Eridos, for all its ancient power, was at their mercy. But Kiera, standing amidst the shattered remains of her world, felt something stir inside her, a fire that would not be extinguished. The Xyl'har had underestimated the heart of her people. Their fall was not inevitable. This was only the beginning, and from the ashes of Eridos they would rise. The galaxy would soon learn that they had made a grave mistake. Days passed in the aftermath of the battle, but the silence of space felt deafening. Kiera Valen stood alone in the remnants of the command center, her reflection mirrored in the cracked, glowing interface screens. The battle had been catastrophic, but not without consequence for the Xyl'har. The Omega Protocol, though not enough to defeat their fleet, had inflicted enough damage to slow them down. It had disrupted their systems, crippled their ability to wage war with the precision they were known for, but even that wasn't enough to turn the tide. Her world was in ruins, her people scattered, and yet there was one thing she knew for certain. Eridos would not fall without a fight. Kiera's mind buzzed with a new determination. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous for the Xyl'har. They had made a fatal mistake. In underestimating the people of Eridos, they had awakened a force they could not easily destroy. Far above, in the void of space, the Xyl'har fleet regrouped. Their warships, imposing and seemingly invincible, now looked a little less certain. The once flawless coordination of their advanced tactics faltered. Damage from the Omega Protocol still rippled through their systems, and the debris field around Eridos served as a reminder of their vulnerability. For the first time in a long while, the Xyl'har were faced with a threat they could not easily crush. Kiera's fingers grazed the damaged holographic maps that had once displayed their tactics, now overlaid with red alerts flashing across the screen. Their entire military apparatus was in disarray, communications scrambled, systems failing, but it wouldn't last long. The Xyl'har were survivors, and they would rebuild, adapt, and strike again. The question was, would they be ready? A single message from the remnants of Eridosian command reached Kiera's comm device. We've located it, the last of the resistance forces. We can fight back, Commander. The message was brief, but it carried the weight of the possibility of survival. There was hope, just a flicker of it. Kiera had once thought the war would be about defense, about survival, but now she understood the truth. It wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about becoming something more. A nemesis, a force that would rise from the ashes, not just to protect Eridos, but to make the Xyl'har regret ever laying waste to her world. She immediately gathered the few survivors left, military strategists, engineers and scientists who had managed to escape the initial strikes. Together, they ventured deep beneath the surface to a place that had once been hidden from the rest of the world, the Eridosian research vaults. This was where the last remnants of Eridos's greatest inventions were stored, the culmination of centuries of technological progress. Some of it was pure science fiction, advances so far beyond contemporary understanding they defied explanation. It was here, in this buried labyrinth of secrets, that Kiera would find her next weapon in their war. But there was something else hidden in the vaults, something Kiera had only heard of in whispers, the Xeno Reforge. It was a relic from the earliest days of Eridos, a creation so dangerous, so alien in its design, that even Kiera's ancestors had been hesitant to study it too closely. The Reforge was a forgotten project, a failed experiment from a time long ago, when the Eridosian people had reached for knowledge beyond their grasp. It was an alien artifact, discovered in the ruins of a distant world, and its potential for both creation and destruction was unmatched. As Kiera approached the vault's entrance, an overwhelming sense of dread crept over her. The Xeno Reforge was not meant to be tampered with. It was more than just a weapon, it was a force, and now it was their only chance at turning the tide. Within the vault, the air was thick with dust, the faint hum of dormant machinery, all that remained of the once active research facility. The walls were lined with data crystals, archaic pieces of technology far beyond anything the modern world had seen. Kiera's fingers hovered over the Reforge's central console, a glowing symbol, flickering in the darkness. This was it, the tool that could help them build a new army, a new kind of force capable of standing against the Xyl'har. The console came to life under Kiera's touch, the room bathed in the eerie blue light of alien symbols scrolling across the screens. The Xeno Reforge was not just an artifact, it was a living entity. Its purpose had been to create warriors, not mere soldiers, but beings born of advanced technology and biological enhancement. It could replicate any living form, infusing them with the physical prowess and intellect of Eridosians, combined with the strength and adaptability of the most lethal species across the galaxy. With a shudder, the machine began to hum louder, its power surging as if awakening from a long slumber. Kiera's heart raced. She could feel the energy in the room change. The Reforge wasn't just reacting to the input, it was responding to her. It was becoming aware of her presence. She wondered for a brief moment if this was the point of no return. What kind of warriors would it create? Would they still be Eridosian, or would they become something else entirely? She didn't have time to question it. The Xyl'har were already preparing their next strike. As the first genetically modified soldiers began to take form, shaped from both biological and technological materials, Kiera realized the full extent of what they were creating. These weren't just soldiers, they were avatars of vengeance. They would be faster, stronger, and more intelligent than any Eridosian warrior before them. And they would carry the memories, the pain, and the wrath of a fallen world. In space, the Xyl'har were preparing their final assault on Eridos. They had learned from their initial mistake and were sending in their full fleet, each warship bristling with weapons designed to obliterate even the toughest resistance. They would not underestimate the Eridosians again, but what they did not anticipate was the force that had been born beneath their feet in the depths of a dying world. And when Kiera led her new army into battle, an army forged from the very heart of Eridos itself, she would show the Xyl'har what it truly meant to face a Nemesis. The galaxy would soon know that Eridos was not just another casualty. Eridos would be their reckoning. The silence of space was shattered by the hum of the Xyl'har fleet as it neared the orbit of Eridos once again. This time, they were ready. Their dreadnoughts, scarred but still formidable, were flanked by an array of smaller vessels, fast, agile fighters that buzzed around their motherships like deadly insects. The Xyl'har had come with overwhelming force, determined to finish what they had started. There would be no mercy this time. Yet despite their numerical superiority and technological advantage, the Xyl'har were unaware of the force now rising from the ashes of Eridos. Kiera Valen and the warriors of the Xeno Reforge stood at the ready. For the first time since the invasion began, she felt an odd sense of calm. The storm was coming, but this time, it would not be her people who would be swept away by it. "Prepare for launch," Kiera ordered, her voice steady, almost cold, as she looked out the observation window at the vast expanse of stars. The remnants of her world stretched beneath her, a broken paradise, yet in its destruction lay the key to their survival. The Xeno Reforge had created more than just soldiers. It had created weapons, beings capable of taking on the Xyl'har with a level of adaptability and intelligence they could never anticipate. The first of the enhanced soldiers, now called the Erythrons, stood in formation, their bodies a seamless blend of organic and synthetic materials, their eyes glowing with an unnatural, intense light. Their armor, forged from the rare minerals found deep within Eridos' crust, shimmered with an almost ethereal quality, reflecting the chaos of their world. Each Erythron was a work of art, a perfect fusion of science and nature, with abilities that far surpassed any Eridosian soldier. Enhanced strength, heightened agility, faster reflexes, and the ability to interface with any piece of technology. They were not just fighters, they were a new breed of warrior, designed for one purpose: vengeance. Kiera looked over the troops, feeling a deep sense of pride mixed with dread. This was their last chance. The Xyl'har were coming for them all, and there would be no negotiation, no surrender. It would be a battle to the death. As the first of the Xyl'har warships entered Eridos' atmosphere, their massive engines blasting away debris and particles, Kiera gave the command. The Erythrons, synchronized in perfect unison, boarded their ships, sleek, agile crafts designed for speed and stealth. The air crackled with energy as they prepared for launch. "Engage at my command," Kiera's voice echoed in their helmets. The moment the Xyl'har ships crossed into the planet's atmosphere, the sky above them was split by the roar of Eridosian engines as the first wave of attack ships launched from hidden bases beneath the surface. But these weren't ordinary ships. The technology embedded within them was a new hybrid of organic and synthetic design. Each ship was partially grown and partially built, infused with the same principles that had created the Erythrons themselves. The Xyl'har fleet took little notice of the small, seemingly insignificant vessels as they streaked across the sky. But soon the first clash came, a jarring explosion as one of the Xyl'har's smaller attack crafts was obliterated by a well-placed strike from an Eridosian fighter. The shockwave rippled through the Xyl'har ranks, and for a brief moment, their confidence faltered. It was a fleeting victory. The Xyl'har responded with brutal efficiency, their ships retaliating in a flurry of coordinated fire. Yet, the Eridosian ships, now piloted by the Erythrons, moved with a deadly precision. They twisted and darted through the chaos, their systems attuned to the very pulse of the battlefield. The enhanced soldiers within them were able to anticipate the movements of the Xyl'har ships before they happened, weaving in and out of danger with an almost supernatural fluidity. Kiera watched the live feeds, her gaze fixed on the battlefield unfolding outside the command center. The Xyl'har were powerful, but they were not prepared for what was coming. For every Xyl'har ship destroyed, 2 more fell under the precision of the Erythrons. But it wasn't just their technology that gave them the edge. The Xeno Reforge had awakened something within these warriors, a hunger for revenge, a drive that could not be easily quelled. The Erythrons fought not just for survival. They fought to reclaim what had been stolen from them. Yet even as they gained the upper hand, Kiera knew that this was only the beginning. The Xyl'har were not a race to be easily beaten. They were relentless, and they had only just begun to unleash their full fury. If Eridos was to have any hope of surviving this war, Kiera would have to play her cards wisely. In the heart of the Xyl'har fleet, their supreme commander Xarath watched the events unfold with a cold fury. He was unlike any other Xyl'har leader, his intellect sharp as a blade, his cruelty tempered only by his military genius. He had already calculated their victory in this war, until now. "We underestimated them," Xarath muttered, his voice low but filled with venom. His fingers drummed against the console in front of him, his eyes flicking across the tactical data as his fleet began to adjust its strategy. "The Eridosians have been enhanced. This will not be as easy as we thought." The Xyl'har had long relied on their overwhelming firepower to crush their enemies, but these new Eridosian forces, these Erythrons, were not easily broken. They adapted to every move the Xyl'har made, their tactics evolving with every engagement, countering and exploiting weaknesses in the Xyl'har's military machine. The battle was no longer a question of firepower. It was a war of wills, and Kiera Valen had ignited a fire within her people that would not be easily extinguished. The tide was turning. The Xyl'har had not expected this resistance, this force. That seemed to grow stronger with every attack. They had come to destroy a world, to erase its people. But in doing so, they had created something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The war was no longer about survival. It was about vengeance. And Kiera, standing at the head of an army born from the ashes of her world, would make sure that the Xyl'har would never forget the name of Eridos. The once serene skies of Eridos were now a battleground, filled with the roar of engines and the explosive echoes of combat. Above the shattered cities and smoldering landscapes, the Xyl'har fleet was being torn apart. Their warships, once symbols of untouchable power, now struggled against an enemy they had not anticipated, an enemy born from the very world they sought to conquer. Kiera Valen stood at the command center, her fingers poised over the glowing interface, watching the live feed of the battle as it raged across the sky. The Xyl'har had underestimated the resolve of the Eridosians, and now they were paying the price. Her pulse raced with every incoming transmission. They were winning, at least for now. But Kiera knew better than anyone. This war was far from over. "Commander Valen," came a voice over the comms, crackling with urgency. It was Darius, one of the surviving generals from the Resistance. "We've hit their shield generators, but they're activating their last line of defense. The Supreme Commander has deployed the Atavic Core, a weapon of unimaginable power." Kiera's heart skipped a beat. The Atavic Core was a Xyl'har doomsday device, a weapon so destructive it could decimate an entire planet. It was their last resort, and the fact that they were resorting to it now spoke volumes about the desperation of their situation. "I know," Kiera replied, her voice calm, even as her mind raced. "We have no time to waste. If we don't stop that core, we lose everything." The Erythrons, her engineered warriors, were the key to their victory. The Xyl'har had become more than just invaders. They had become a force of destruction that sought to wipe Eridos from the galaxy's memory. But Kiera had a new plan, one that would deliver a blow so devastating the Xyl'har would never again dare to challenge her world. "Deploy the Xeno Shadow Fleet," Kiera commanded, her voice resolute. The Xeno Shadow Fleet, a force of stealth, ships and elite Erythron soldiers, was ready for the final assault. These ships were designed for one thing: infiltration. They were built to slip past even the most advanced defense systems, striking directly at the heart of the enemy. Kiera turned to the battle map projected before her, fingers moving deftly across the console. She could feel the weight of each decision bearing down on her. The stakes had never been higher. If they were to stop the Atavic Core, they needed to get past the Xyl'har's defenses, something no one had done before. Outside the command center, the rumble of distant explosions shook the air. The Xyl'har were pushing back with a fury that matched the devastation they had already caused. Their fighters cut through the Eridosian lines like knives, and the ground forces were slowly losing ground. But the Xeno Shadow Fleet was different. They were silent, swift, and deadly. They would strike where the Xyl'har were weakest. The battle had reached a critical point. Above them, in the heart of the Xyl'har fleet, the Atavic Core began to glow with an eerie, pulsating light. Its presence was undeniable, a sickly green radiance that cast an unnatural glow over the surrounding ships. It was ready to fire, ready to burn Eridos to ashes. Kiera had no time to waste. With a deep breath, she issued the final command. "Initiate Operation Vengeance." The Xeno Shadow Fleet sprang to life, their engines silent but powerful as they darted through the chaos of the battlefield. The ships, cloaked in the dark, undetectable technology that had been a gift from the Xeno Reforge, slipped past the Xyl'har defenses undetected. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the heart of the Xyl'har fleet and disable the Atavic Core before it could fire. The Erythrons inside each ship moved with deadly grace, their enhanced minds calculating every movement with precision. They knew what was at stake. There was no room for error. As the fleet approached the Atavic Core, Kiera's eyes never left the screen. She could see the coordinates of the Xyl'har flagship, a monstrous vessel surrounded by layers of defense. The Atavic Core was housed deep within the flagship's belly, a fortress of shields and weaponry, designed to protect it from anything that might dare to get close. But the Xeno Shadow Fleet had one advantage the Xyl'har could never account for: the Erythrons could adapt. Their genetically engineered minds allowed them to think faster, act quicker, and process information in real time. They were not just soldiers, they were problem solvers, and this mission required them to be nothing less than perfect. "Initiating breach," Darius's voice crackled over the comms, sharp with tension. "In 5, 4, 3, 2. Moment the countdown ended, the Xeno Shadow Fleet unleashed their attack. A wave of explosive charges ripped through the outer hull of the Xyl'har flagship, breaching its defenses with surgical precision. Inside the flagship, the Xyl'har commanders scrambled, attempting to regain control, but it was too late. The Erythrons had already infiltrated the core. "Heading to the reactor," Kiera heard from the field commander as his Erythrons advanced toward the heart of the Xyl'har flagship. The flagship trembled as the Xeno Shadow Fleet's charges detonated, within sending ripples of shockwaves through the entire ship. But then disaster struck. Xyl'har warlord, a towering figure encased in adaptive armor, emerged from the shadows, wielding a plasma blade that hummed with deadly intent. He cut down the first few Erythrons with brutal efficiency, but the rest pushed forward, undeterred by his power. These soldiers were different. They were born for this moment. The Erythrons fought with everything they had, using their enhanced reflexes and weapons to engage the warlord in a battle that seemed to stretch on forever. It was a fight that would determine the fate of Eridos. The Atavik Core's countdown continued. There were only moments left. Kiera stood frozen, her heart in her throat as she watched the final seconds tick away on her screen. "Do it now," she whispered, barely audible over the comms. The commander's voice came back, strained but triumphant. "Core disabled. We did it." A deafening explosion shook the Xyl'har flagship, and the Atavik core, the weapon that had once seemed unstoppable, went dark. The heart of the Xyl'har fleet had been crippled. Kiera allowed herself a breath, but it was short-lived. The war was not over, but this battle, the most crucial one, had been won. As the remaining Xyl'har ships scattered, retreating from Eridos with as much haste as they could muster, Kiera stood tall. Her people had been tested. Their world had been shattered. But from the ashes they had risen, not as victims, but as a force that would no longer be underestimated. Eridos had become something more than a planet. It had become a symbol. And, now with the Xyl'har retreating, and their ultimate weapon neutralized, the galaxy would remember the day the Xyl'har learned they had created their greatest nemesis. And Kiera Valen. She had become the embodiment of that reckoning. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this epic tale of vengeance, war, and redemption, be sure to like, share, and comment below. Your thoughts fuel the fires of our next chapter. Until then, may your battles be legendary.